Today's rumor is definitely, it's a rumor, so take that with a huge grain of salt. Essentially, several different group of sources are all kind of pointing towards one thing, but all of them are not super reliable, which is why I'm not really expecting this to happen. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I really want it to happen. And in my opinion, this would be the absolute best way for Apple to introduce Apple Silicon to the Mac. And I don't feel confident that it's real, but I didn't feel super confident about the Apple Watch SE leak either, and that ended up happening. So let's talk about Apple's first Mac to ship with Apple branded silicon. Let's begin. So this comes from two separate sources, the China Times as well as Digitimes, which I guess it's all the times coming together here. Boy, time flies, doesn't it, these days? And I think this would be one of the coolest things we could expect at the next Apple event if there are no new iPhones. I'm sorry, iPads and Apple Watches, that's not going to fill up an hour-and-a-half long event. So if there was something else to talk about, I think this would be a really good one. They're suggesting that in the fourth quarter of this year, Apple, working with TSMC, is going to be ramping production for the first 5nm chip that's not just the one going into the iPhone, okay? We know that's the A14 chip. It's basically an open secret. But this one is the A14X chip, which apparently they're going to be ramping soon, specifically for new iPad Pros, which aren't rumored to launch until around Q2 of next year, so I don't think those are just around the corner. But the Chinese report here is claiming that they actually want to also use this A14X chip in a super thin, ultra-light 12-inch MacBook. And just from the beginning, I just want to acknowledge that that doesn't sound super believable, as cool as it does sound. The truth is, Apple said they were going to come up with a new family of Apple Silicon chips for the Mac, and using the same chips that they plan on putting in iPads and iPhones. It doesn't sound super believable, but it's possible that this new family of chips, maybe that doesn't get different or separate branding. Maybe, at least with the entry-level MacBook, they start to share some of the silicon of the iPad Pro, but as unlikely as this report may be, think about it for a second. The A12Z chip is already extremely powerful and is able to edit high-resolution video, do great photo editing on the iPad. Now we're talking A14 chip, which is going to be better than the A12Z, and then exponentially better with A14X, even more powerful than before, and putting that into an ultra-thin, probably fanless MacBook, and that's how we kind of revive the 12-inch design, which is, in my opinion, a really awesome notebook design. It's just limited by the powerhouse that's inside of it. I remember reviewing the 12-inch MacBook and liking it quite a bit, actually. The biggest issue with it, of course, was just there were no fans, and the specs of it were pretty terrible for what you were paying for, which meant that when you bought a 12-inch MacBook, pretty much all your money was just going towards the design. It's thin, it's light. In fact, that was one of the keyboards I could actually type on with my thumbs, because that's how small and compact the keyboard was, and that's how small and thin and portable that laptop was. It was an awesome machine, apart from the crappy specs, which sadly is kind of important to a lot of us. So if they could revive that design with the extreme performance gains that we would get out of an A14X chip, which likely could even beat the entry-level 13-inch MacBook Pros right now because of how strong and how powerful we're seeing the A12Z chip already, with another exponential boost in CPU and GPU performance and likely 12 cores in a MacBook like that. For one, great power efficiency, which is another awesome benefit that the China Times reported on, saying that this 12-inch MacBook would have somewhere between a 15 and a 20-hour battery life. MacBook's batteries have always sucked, especially when they're exporting and doing high-intensive tasks. So imagine now that you had a laptop that could last like twice or 50% longer than your current laptop, and the specs were still really good, but operation-wise, completely silent. There's no fans, it's just the silicon inside doing its thing, just like the silence of the iPad Pro. In my opinion, that would be such an epic way to introduce what's to come with future Mac lineups, because obviously we're not going to get all of the new Apple Silicon chips at the same time. This is going to be like a 2-year process. And like Sam from iUpdate talked about, introducing kind of the entry-level silicon chips first is probably the best way to show people like, hey, this is what we're capable of. And if they start selling a 12-inch MacBook and it's say $1,000 or $1,100, but you're able to get 13-inch MacBook Pro-like performance out of that chip, people know that there's only good things to come. That means that the redesigned iMac is going to get an even better silicon chip, and the 16-inch MacBook Pro is going to get even better, and Mac Mini and Mac Pro Pro will eventually get something probably even more high performance, but in my opinion, introducing Apple Silicon to the Mac in a thin and light device that has great battery life and at the same time great specs and great performance so that you could even, for instance, I don't know, play games on that thing or edit high resolution video or edit audio tracks and all the things we love using our Macs for, but in a super thin compact device. That's like Apple's dream, right? Apple's always wanted to make devices thinner, lightweight, and compact, and if they were able to finally bring back that super light MacBook they love so much, but with that 5nm chip and the extreme gains of that, oh my god, in my opinion, that's the best way they could possibly handle this. So I hope that ends up being real, despite the fact that Digitimes and the China Times, yeah, they got kind of spotty track records, and I don't want what other leakers are saying. I've seen a few people suggest that, well, the first Apple Silicon Mac is basically just going to be the 13-inch MacBook Pro. Same exact design, no changes to the outside, it just happens to have a new silicon chip on it, and we do the Geekbench test, and it's like, oh, cool, it's faster, yay. No, I think showcasing what's possible with Apple Silicon first, with an entry-level machine, and knowing that other silicon is only going to get better than this one, I think that would get people excited. It would cater to a new market that Apple hasn't really been capable of designing for in a long time, because they've been kind of stuck with, well, if you want something light and thin, it's got to have crappy specs, and if you want something with lots of power, you're going to need a bigger, thicker, heavier machine. So if Apple Silicon lets Apple finally have the best of both worlds next week or next October, November, whenever the event is where they want to talk about Apple Silicon, I think that's the best way to showcase it. And they seem to emphasize that a lot at the last Quadruple UDC when they talked about performance and power efficiency. Why not introduce it into an ultra-thin laptop? In my opinion, there's no better way to introduce it. But what do you guys think? Is the A14X chip, should that be reserved for iPads and the Mac should get something else? Or maybe with the first entry-level Mac, sharing it with future iPad Pros could also make sense. Feel free to let me know what you guys are thinking, and hopefully letting me know when in the last stretch of this year to expect this MacBook. This is your Apple Shape here. I'll see you in the next one.